series called Pursuit of Jesus, right? Pursuit of Jesus. And last week, to recap again, we heard from Manny and Pastor Jules. They tag teamed, and they talked about pursuing Jesus, praising him in the prison and praising him till you're out of prison. Amen? Pursuit of Jesus. It got me thinking, in my pursuit of Jesus, do I value the presence of Jesus? Do I recognize the presence of Jesus? If Jesus walked into this room, would I be able to spot him out and say, hey, he just came. He's right there. There's Jesus. Would I recognize him? So what I want you all to do with me just right now is imagine Jesus in your mind, all right? But don't cop out like I do. And it's like, he's like this bright, shiny light. No. I want you to picture the physical, because Jesus has a physically resurrected body. One day we're all going to see his face, his body. You could touch his hair, right? He let disciples do that. After he resurrected, he's like, touch my hands, touch it. We're going to see a physical Jesus standing before us. So I want you to try to imagine in your mind right now, what does Jesus look like? Okay. All right. If you could share the slideshow. Now, in the past 50 or 60 years, the most proliferated picture of Jesus was this painting called the Head of Christ, right? Now, I look at that and I'm like, okay, I definitely saw that picture growing up. There's over 500 million copies of this sold, right? Not counting all the ones that like I did. I just grabbed it off the internet. I didn't buy this. 500 million copies sold. And this was the Jesus that I kind of grew up with, where I was like, wow, like the bone structure, right? Like the high cheekbones, that like, I don't know what kind of conditioner he's using, like no pores, the beard. I can't grow a beard. I've tried, right? And it's like neatly trimmed. I'm just like, he looks like a model or like a hipster. And like that's kind of been the image that's predominated the past 50, 60 years of Jesus around the globe. But I know we're in the Bay Area, right? We're a little more aware of things. And so I'm not a painter, but I know how to use the internet. So I was like, AI, what would Jesus look like if he came for Gen Z? So this is here he is. I call him Gen Zesus, right? Gen Zesus. So 1997, 2012, that's what it looks like. Slightly more ethnically ambiguous, approachable, friendly, still got great hair, right? Smiling. Gen Zesus. There he is. And I was like, but what about the generation before that, right? What would it look like as millennial Jesus? That's what AI said, okay? You know, thank you for millennial pink, all the sad beige children out there. He's still got a hint of a smile, some kind of whimsical look in his eyes, staring off into the distance. There's millennial Jesus. But now kind of my generation, even though I'm kind of what they call a zennial, I'm kind of in between Generation X and millennial. Gen X Jesus, a little more angsty, a little more moody. He's in the I'm withdrawing to the desert to be with my father period right now. Gen X Jesus, and then we can't forget about our parents, right? Baby boomer Jesus, where you at? Boom! There you go, right? Like there's a reason why Jesus was like 33, I'm out, right? Like baby boomer Jesus. Maybe not what you expect. Like one thing I know, no, Jesus is not bald, okay? He is not multiplied. He's not bald. Now, here's the thing. What if he was? What if Jesus, I think of Jesus, and I'm like, there's a statue of Jesus in Korea. Google Korean statue Jesus. What you're going to see is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, he's got muscles on top of muscles. Like, we have this image of Jesus in our minds of what he'd be like. I've had people get upset at me when I said, like, maybe Jesus had, like, a little belly. Like, Jesus would not be out of shape. He carried the cross, right? Like, I was like, it's like, yeah, but he had some help. No, I'm kidding. But, like, we have this idea or expectation of what Jesus would look like. And then I was like, okay, I know all these Jesus so far have been more on the light-skinned complexion. Now, this AI is just pulling from what's out in the internet. So I went down the rabbit hole. And I was like, give me black Jesus. Give me Korean Jesus, Guatemalan Jesus, Tongan Jesus, Samoan Jesus. You get it, Jesus. Everybody gets a Jesus, right? But there was a medical artist. And this medical artist was like, I want to be more authentic in representing who Jesus is. And so this artist studied several Semite skulls from the region where Jesus was living. And using modern forensic techniques, aka magic, and select biblical passages where I don't know how that quite worked, constructed this image right here. Not of Jesus, he says, but of a man that would have been living during the time of Jesus. That's probably more accurate than any picture we've seen of what Jesus might have looked like. Not something you would probably hang in your house, right? Who's that? Is that your uncle? That's my Lord and Savior, right? It's like, are you sure that's not your uncle? That's the one I worship. The average height of a man back in those days was what? Did anyone know? Wow, look at you people. 5'6", 5'. I say 5'6" because I'm 5'7" with my Nikes on. And I like to think I would have been a little taller than Jesus. In my head, on that day when I meet him in the flesh, I always thought I would have been like, Jesus. But now I've been like, Jesus. And some of you, we got some basketball players be like, Jesus. I don't know if you ever, you better get down, right? Jesus. Even what I think he should look like is not what I think. How much more what I think he should be like doesn't match with who he actually is. Like, forget the height, the hair, the skin. What is he actually like? We all have an expectation of who he is. Now, in the Bible, even his own disciples who walked with him, who heard him preach, who ate with him, couldn't recognize him. They couldn't recognize him as the Messiah, and after he was coming back from the grave, still couldn't recognize him. Now, there's a story in Luke, and it goes like this. The Emmaus disciples. Now that same day, two of them were on their way to a village called Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Together, they were discussing everything that had taken place. So two were walking to Emmaus. While they were discussing and arguing, that always happens on a road trip, Jesus himself came near and began to walk along with them, but they were prevented from recognizing him. Then he asked them, "What is this dispute that you're having with each other and as you were walking?" And they stopped walking and looked discouraged. So something has discouraged them, and they're walking away from Jerusalem. The one named Cleopas answered him, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened in these days?" My translation, "Are you stupid?" And Jesus, "What things?" "I am." No, what things, he asked them. So they said to him, "The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, powerful in action and speech before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him." Okay, now we see why they're leaving. "But we were hoping that he was the one who was about to redeem Israel. Besides all this, it's the third day since these things have happened. Moreover, some women from our group astounded us. They arrived early at the tomb, and when they didn't find his body, they came and reported that they seen a vision of angels who said he was alive." Well, then what are you arguing about? Back in those days, a woman's testimony also not admissible in court. But they're telling you, wait, they all said it's the third day. What did Jesus say that would happen on the third day? They're like, it's the third day. These women went to the tomb. It's empty. They saw angels that said he's alive. Let's go back to Emmaus. When they didn't find his body, they came and reported the vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb to verify and found it just as the woman had said, but they didn't see him. Now, he said to them, "How foolish you are and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Wasn't it necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted for them things concerning himself and all the scriptures. Now, they're walking to Emmaus, right? Now, here's the thing about Emmaus. Anytime anyone talked about Emmaus, every first century Jew knew exactly what you were talking about. Now, maybe if I said Paris, imagine Paris. There's probably pictures that come to your mind. There's probably ideas that come to your mind. Maybe you saw this picture of Paris right here, something like this, where you have a picture of an Eiffel Tower, right? And then you're like, oh, Paris, Eiffel Tower, romance, baguettes, right? You just have this understanding of what Paris is. Back in those days, Emmaus was a city that every Jewish child, man, woman knew about because it was famous for being the hometown of a family called the Hammers, right? The Hammers, or Maccabees. Now, the Hammer family was a family that rose up against the Syrian army, occupying empire, fought against them, and drove them out. Now you see why their name is called the Hammer, right? If I'm ever in trouble, I want my friend, the Hammer, right? Like, hey, Hammer! I don't want, hello! No, I want the Hammer to come. This family's called the Hammer. So Emmaus, if you grew up in Emmaus, there's a pride you carry. Like, yeah, our city, our town is the one that brought the hammers and drove out the enemy, drove out the oppressors. That's where we come from. And the Jewish people had this idea of an anointed one, a chosen one, a Messiah. And what do Messiahs do? Messiahs smash like hammers. Messiah smash. Hammer smash. Messiah smash. Hammer Messiah. They're coming from a place where they've heard this story of a Messiah that comes to smash the enemies. Not only that, all these things happen during Passover. And what's happening during Passover? It's the story where they're talking about how they were freed from Egypt. So everything is working towards this thing, and they're like, Jesus, we are hoping he'd be the one to redeem Israel. Now, that word redeem, the first place you see that word redeem is actually in Exodus when it's talking about Moses. We were hoping that he would be the one who would redeem like Moses, who brought us out of Egypt, and this whole week they're celebrating Passover of the story of Moses, the Messiah, coming to rescue them, pull them out of Egypt. They came from Emmaus the whole time where they grow up hearing about the Messiah that smashed the Syrians, right? They study the scriptures. David smashed Goliath and the Philistines, and then they're celebrating Passover where Moses smashed Pharaoh and brought them into freedom. And this whole time they're like, that's the Messiah. And then they see Jesus who walks around doing even greater miracles. No one can preach like Jesus. No one can teach like Jesus. No one can perform miracles they're like, I know this script. I've heard this story since I was a child. I lived it. I come from it. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus gonna smash. Then what happens? Jesus got smashed. He got smashed on the cross. And they're like, you can't be the Messiah because Messiah smash. And they're just heartbroken. And they turn around and they walk back to Emmaus. What stops our pursuit of God? What stops our pursuit of God? There's a couple things I have, but the thing I want to key on today is, I think, disappointment. More than any fancy philosophy, ideology, or BuzzFeed article you read, I think disappointment is actually at the root of what causes people to stop their pursuit of God and turn away. When you take a step of faith and you risk and you hope, and then it doesn't turn out the way you thought. You know, when things get cut short, maybe it was a job. You showed up on Monday, and then in your email it says, thank you, Scott is here to help you collect your things and escort you out of the building. Right? Or a relationship, and you thought, I thought we had forever, or at least 2 more months, and they were done. Right? Like something got cut short. Or it could have been a relationship or you were praying for a healing, and it didn't happen. And now there's like this disappointment, and you don't know what to do with that. And to say, I guess, Jesus, you're not who you said you were. I guess you're not the Messiah. I had hoped. I actually hoped and put my faith, but maybe you're not the Messiah. But even in their disappointment, it says they stood there and they were just discouraged. Even in your disappointment, even in your walking away, Jesus is drawing near. When they were they weren't pursuing Jesus. They weren't running after Jesus. They were walking the other way. Jesus is the one that drew near to them. And I'm telling you, they couldn't recognize him. And I'm telling you right now, you're like, where is Jesus? Yeah, you can't recognize him right now. When you're in the middle of your disappointment, you can't see him. You can't hear him. You can't feel him. But he is drawing near to you. He is drawing near to you, just like he drew near to the disciples. So they say, you don't know what's been happening? What things? And they explain to him all the things, all the heartache, the hope, the brokenness, the despair. They pour out and they share to Jesus. And then this is just how Jesus responds. He says, are you foolish? Are you stupid? Are you really this slow? And we're like, no, that's not, no. Give me Gen Z. Give me Gen Jesus. Like, Jesus should be like, come here. Jesus wouldn't even say a word. He'd just look in my eyes and I'd be like, He would just pull me up, bring me in, just comfort me. No, he says to them, are you foolish? Are you stupid? Are you this slow? Jesus would say that? He did. He said those words. And some of you are like, see, that's why I tell you, when you stupid, I'm just being like Jesus, babe. like, like, let's talk afterwards, okay? Let's talk afterwards. That's Jesus, okay? And it says that he begins to open up the scriptures to them. Here's what we need to do. When you're in that place of disappointment, where you're like, God, where are you? Where you feel like, I didn't leave God, God left me. Jesus takes them to the scriptures. I've never met a mature believer who wasn't in their scriptures. I don't see how you could get through this life without the scriptures, because the longer I've lived, the harder stuff I've had to go through. There was a time where I didn't need this. I felt like I didn't like, hey, there's a really good song and I play that 7 times, that will get me through. Right? Oh, it hit. Oh, just wait. It just dropped right there. Oh, yeah. Put it on repeat, my playlist. But the older I get, the more sorrow and loss and grief and disappointment comes. I can't get through with the playlist. I need the words of God. I need the words of God to speak life into me, to shape me. And here's the thing. Don't just read the word. Don't just memorize the word, right? Read the words until you can start to recognize his voice. Don't just memorize it. Start to hear his voice. He said, my sheep recognize and know my voice. I read this so that I could recognize his voice. And when I see him one day, and when I hear his voice one day, I'll be like, I recognize you, Jesus. There's a room, there's millions of people in heaven, and I'll be like, oh, it's not just because you're on the throne, that's a giveaway, but I recognize you. I recognize you. Read the scriptures, hear his voice. Jesus takes them through the scriptures. Jesus could have been like, it's me, Jesus, let's go that away. He could have saved himself. You know, like, I'm a parent. Oh, my daughter's actually sitting here today, so I won't say too long. I have to, anyway. But you got to explain things a lot. And you can give a detailed explanation one time, and you're like, I explained it so well. You're going to have to explain it again and again and again. Jesus could have saved himself so much time. He's even like, are you really this foolish? Are you really? Well, you should know you're Jesus. It's like, let me explain it to you again. And he says, starting from Moses and the prophets and the book of law, basically the entire Bible that they had at that time. He said, I'm going to show you. And what does it say? That the Messiah needs to suffer first and then enter into his glory. See, they created their own cultural version of the Messiah. Messiah smash. And Jesus is like, well, if we look at the scriptures, it says Messiah suffers. Messiah smash. Messiah suffer. Messiah smash. Messiah suffer. Then Messiah smash. Yeah, right. It's like, it says he needs to suffer first. Then he enters. We want to skip the suffering and go right to the glory. No, he says, no, we go through the suffering. Messiah goes through the suffering, and then he enters his glory. And they start to understand, actually, I had a disappointment. I had a wrong conception and a wrong picture because I misunderstood what the scriptures were saying. And he shows them in every book where it points to prophecies of the Messiah suffering and then entering into glory. And they're saying, wait, I thought this wasn't part of the plan. But now I see it is part of the plan. And then they get too amazed. They've made it home. And it says that Jesus, I love this, gives the impression that he's going to move on. Like he's like, well, glad you made it safely home. I'm going to keep going. And what does it say? They urged him to stay. I think the saddest and most dangerous thing is that you were just near enough to Jesus that you never invite him in. That you're part of the crowd, but not the core. Like you come to church, you've heard the messages, you're so familiar, you can't even recognize him anymore. He never surprises you. The scriptures open up. I know, I heard that before. I heard 7 messages better than yours. I could preach it. I already know it. I knew that point. I knew you were going to say that. And I knew that you knew that I said that you were going to say that I said that. It's like you become so familiar that you stop being open to what God can do, to showing you who he is. You know everything. No one can talk to you because you already know. We become so familiar that we confuse proximity with intimacy. You know, one time my wife was sad, and I didn't make her sad this time, all right? But she was sad, and I could see that she was sad. Observant, caring husband that I am. I could see that she was sad, and I knew why she was sad. Just husband of the year right here, right? See she's sad, didn't ignore it. Also, empathy. I know why you're sad. But for some reason, I decided to ask her, I see that you're looking really sad right now. What's going on? And she started to tell me, I'm sad. I was like, I know. And then she started telling me why she was sad. And it was a completely different reason. It was not even what I thought it was. And I looked at her like, who are you? That's intimacy. Intimacy is, who are you? Intimacy is not, I know you. I already know you. I don't need to know another thing. I know you. Done. Close the book. Bye. Oh, I already know. Intimacy is, wait. Who are you really? Show me more. Show me another side. I know you're from Alabama, but what else? Like, that's intimacy. You know, I mean, one time I had a friend, and I was 19, 20 years old, and we always had Friday night, boys' night, right? We go to this Nazario pizza place, and we go bowling and whatever. You know, I guess looking back, I'm like, oh, it's kind of boring. But back then, we're like, boys' night, pizza, bowling, yeah. And then one day, I come over to his house, and he opens the door, lets me in, and just ignores me. And he's on the phone. I'm like, whatever, we got to go soon. Come on, let's go. And he's actually cleaning the baseboards. I don't even know if you know what that is. It's the little trim that's at the bottom. Who even looks at that stuff, right? But apparently it gets dirty. He had a toothbrush, and he was scrubbing the baseboard. I'm like, what are you doing, you fool? And he's talking on the phone, and I don't even know who he's talking to, but pretty soon I was able to figure out because he's like, what'd you eat for lunch? I'm like, what? He's like, oh, you ate a sandwich? Yeah. What do you eat for dinner? I'm like, bro, it's boys' night. He was talking to some girl. He didn't want proximity. He wanted intimacy. He wanted I want to know, what's your favorite cup? What's your favorite number? Is it my number? I'll give it to you, right? Intimacy, there's this wonder and curiosity. Now, they said, oh, Jesus of what? Of Nazareth. Nazareth was a childhood home of Jesus. It's a town that's considered unremarkable, like San Leandro or Fresno or Vacaville, right? You know, like, hey, don't get mad at me. No, hey, I see some angry people, so Fresno, yes, right? Like, I got love for Fresno. Vacaville, it literally means cowtown, so that's not my fault, okay? That's not my fault. But Nazareth, it was a place like no one talked about Nazareth. No one cared about Nazareth, but that's how they saw him. Jesus of Nazareth. Some scholars believe that this person, Cleopas, was actually the brother of Joseph, who was married to Mary, who is the mother of Jesus, his uncle. Some people think, now, that's the thing. When you're older and you got a nephew or a niece, no matter how they're grown. No, I'm 45 now. I'm married. I got 2 kids. People that knew me when I was 5, they're like, little Joseph. And there might have been an element of that. Like, hey, it's little Jesus from Nazareth, my little nephew. I know who he is. I changed his diapers. I know him. And that knowing prevented them from seeing him. What you think you know of Jesus sometimes gets in the way of you seeing Jesus. He wants to come and shock you, show you who he really is. So he pretends like he's going to go further. And I just apologize right now to the slide person because the slides are all out of whack now. He pretends like he's going to go further. They urge him to stay. They invite him in. The intimacy, like, I just don't want to be near you. No, I want you in, Jesus. We all know the scripture. He stands at the door and knocks. If anyone opens, he will come in and dine with them. Don't just keep him outside the house. Invite him in. So they invite him in. Now, here's the thing that happens. This is the good. He takes the bread. Now, here's the thing. This isn't his house. If you are the owner of the house and the host of the house, you take the bread. You bless it and break it and give it to your guests. Once you invite him in, he's not going to sit in the passenger seat. You say, this is my house, Jesus. Come on. He's like, I'm driving this. Right? It's not like, Jesus, you sleep in the guest room. You stay in the back seat. No, inviting him in means giving him control. If you haven't given him control, you haven't invited him in. So they invite him in, and he takes the bread. He blesses it, and he breaks it, and he gives it to them. And what happens in that moment? Their eyes are opened, and they recognize him. The scriptures were important, but it wasn't the preaching. They're like, I heard this message before. I heard this illustration. This is Jesus' story. No. It wasn't even the scriptures or the stories. There's something about breaking the bread, blessing it, and giving it to them while around the table. They were like, I recognize him now. Now, here's the thing. This word blessed, it first appears in Genesis when Jesus takes Adam and Eve and says he blesses them and says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. When Jesus blesses the bread, he's not like, bless the hands that made this. No, when he blessed the bread, he's saying, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. Check this out. Adam and Eve ate the fruit that God said not to eat. What happened after that? Their eyes were opened. And they recognized what? That they were naked. And in this moment, Jesus takes the bread. He blesses it. The same blessing he gave in Eden. He blesses it, breaks it, give it to them. And what happens? The disciples' eyes are open. And who do they recognize? They recognize Jesus. They're not looking at themselves. I'm so sinful, my nakedness. No, they open their eyes and they can only recognize Jesus. This is not just poetic literature. This is God saying, hey, you've got a choice, and your choices have consequences. But you know who else has a choice? Me. And my choice, there is that one song. I'm going to the song. Songs are not bad. Says, and with one breath, what? 100 billion failures disappear. He said, you have a choice, but so did I. You chose to eat the fruit. You chose to sin. You chose to walk away. I'm going to choose to give my son, and my son is going to choose to go on the cross. And because of the choice I made, I am reestablishing my blessing to make you fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. And no longer will you focus on, I've sinned here and yesterday and my sin. No, he's like, no, yeah, you did what you did, but I did what I did. And when someone says, what about your past? And say, every time I look at the past, I keep looking past the past and to the cross, and I see what he did, and I focus on what Jesus did, not just what I did. Woo! My wife, she's amazing. She is amazing. When we got married, I already knew before we got married, okay, you're always going to make more than me. Like, I was a pastor, getting paid, you know, and I was like, listen, you married me by faith, and God loves faith. God will reward this faith and give you a great job. And so, actually, but when we got married, we moved. And so we were both jobless. And we were like, okay, we're getting married. We need monies. Okay. So we're figuring out how to find jobs. And this is how we did. This was like before LinkedIn. And we went on Craigslist, y'all. We were on Craigslist. Job. Right? Like, right. We didn't know how to use LinkedIn or none of that stuff. We clicked on job. And so my wife actually got a job first. And then I got hired by another church. And she was working at this school. And near this school, on her flight pattern, sometimes she would go to this cafe. How many of you guys know World Grounds on MacArthur? Some of you guys know that place. And one day she walked into this coffee shop. And the person there is kind of being like a little not friendly, even just rude. And a few weeks previous, there was a coworker of hers that was also being kind of unfriendly to her. Like she'd walk in the copying machine room, and then all of her copies would be in the trash. And then the other person would be the only person in there. Like other things had happened. And I don't know why, but I was just like, your coworker is a witch. Right? Like, and I don't go around saying like, oh, witch. Like, I don't do that. And I didn't mean like witch, like she's mean. I was like, no, I actually think like she's involved in like witchcraft. That's not something I said about people, I think, ever. But I was just like, I feel like she's a witch. And it's not just because she's mean to you. I feel like, she's dabbling in some stuff. A couple days later, students at the school told my wife, so-and-so told us that, they do white magic, but it's good magic and earth magic. And I was like, look, there's a spiritual dynamic here. For no reason, she's just da-da-da-da-da. Like, there's something happening spiritually that she doesn't understand that just makes her, like, agitated around you. Right? So, with this in her head, like, oh, she was a witch. She walks in, and this barista is being rude to her. And so she goes, oh, if you don't like me, you must be a witch. And I think most of us would stop there, not my wife. She asked him, are you a warlock? She does. And he looks at her and he says, listen, I ain't got time to teach you little fairy magic. I'm in the real stuff. He's like, and she shot back, I'm not interested in learning from you. I follow Jesus. And then he looked at her and he said, I curse you to die. Here's your latte. That'll be $4.50. She said, thank you very much. She takes that latte. I don't know if she left a tip. She's not trying to be Karen, but customer service is terrible, right? And she leaves that place. She texts me what happened. And I said, there's a scripture in Deuteronomy that says he will turn every curse into a blessing. Here's the other thing. It was February 28th, her birthday. Come on, this is spiritual. On the day of her birth, the enemy is like, I curse you to die. She's like, well, I'm going to celebrate my birth. She texts me, and I said, Deuteronomy, every curse he will turn into a blessing. We used to be part of a church called Living Hope in Emeryville. I get a text message from the treasurer. He's like, someone just gave you a love offering. It's a check for $27.31, something like that. And so I was like, babe, I texted Aaron right back. I was like, babe, go back to the cafe. Tell that barista his curses are only worth $27.31. Do better. This ain't going to pay the cell bill. That's like, and so a couple weeks pass by, maybe a month or two passes by, she stops by again. And that guy is there again. And she's like, oh, it's this guy again. And he's like, oh, hey, well, obviously it didn't work. You're still alive. But he apologized. He's like, I'm sorry. I was just in a bad, I'm like, when I'm in a bad mood, I don't curse people. Actually, I do. Right? He's like, I'm sorry. I was just in a bad mood, having a bad day. And so, like, I apologize about all that. And, like, but, you know, like, ever since I met you, I lost my powers. He's like, I don't know if you believe me. He's like, but I used to be able to levitate. Now, maybe some of you guys are like, what? Whether you believe it or not, that's what he believed. That's what he said. He said, but I lost my abilities. But you know what? Like, there was a lot of dark stuff, and it was getting kind of scary. Like, I don't do that stuff anymore. Like, now I'm in, like, new age, positivity, good vibes. Like that's what I'm doing. And so, you know, Aaron's just like, okay, I'm still watching you while you pour my latte, right? Like, she leaves. Maybe another couple months go by. She stops by. And he goes, I've been waiting for you. Oh, my God, I'm so excited. I've been hoping you'd come by. And she's like, yeah, okay, what's going on? He's like, hey, remember I told you, like, I'm in New Age. I met my spirit guide. And my wife is very comfortable with stuff because she grew up in a small beach town, whereas, like, you mix a little bit of Eastern religion and Buddhism and yoga and surfing and weed, and you mix it all together, and that's your religion, right? That's your religion. So she's like, I am familiar with this world. I can guide you through this. He's like, I met my spirit guide. She said, oh, you did? Tell me more. And he says, well, I had a dream. My spirit guide revealed himself and said that he was going to clothe me in righteousness. I'm so excited. Aaron's like, me too. She says, I know your spirit guide. And he goes, you know him? She's like, yeah, I can introduce you to him. I can connect you right now. He calls over the other person that's working and says, hey, I'm going to go into the back room. If you've been to World Grounds, there's a back room. He says, let's go. And she's like, okay. They walk. They sit down at one of the tables. She puts her hand on his shoulder, and she's not praying out loud, but she just prays, Holy Spirit, come. Jesus, come. And she's just praying in her head. This guy is sitting like this, both hands. Like, he knows the posture of receiving, right? He's like, under a minute, he just starts shaking. And some of you said, oh no. He's going to go, yeah. Erin had the same feeling. Her exact thoughts were, dang it. Because like, my lunch break is not that long. She's like, I've actually experienced stuff like this before where I've had to walk people through something called deliverance because they've dabbled with some spiritual things. There's a residue and there's things you need to go through to be set free from that. It's like, and for her at that time, she's like, it's a long process, and like I've got 15 minutes. I don't know if I can do this, and I don't want to leave someone in this state. And he starts shaking, so she opens her eyes, and he's shaking, and then he just starts to shout, it's him! It's him! It's him! It's Jesus! It's Jesus! It's Jesus! It's Jesus! And he's just shouting, and his coworker runs in. She's like, what the? And he's like, it's Jesus. And then he looks at her and says, you know me. You know me. You know I hate Christianity. Jesus is my spirit guide. He's my spirit guide. And she's like, I'm out. She just walks away, walks right back. And Erin's sitting there. She's like, I can make it back to work. Right? And he's like, and he says, how did you know? How did you know? How did you know that was Jesus? She said, in the scriptures. He says that he will clothe us in garments of salvation and clothe us in robes of righteousness. And he went, you mean that is in the Bible? Y'all should lead with that. He's like, why make it so? You know all the stuff I had to go through to get here. Clothe you with righteousness. The disciples' eyes in that moment, he breaks the bread. Their eyes are open and they say, it's him. It's him. It's Jesus. And Jesus says, that's my cue. Bloop. He vanishes. Now you see me, now you don't. Da, da, da. Like, but here's the thing. Now they can't unsee him. They look at any book in the Bible, any prophet, any scripture, they see Jesus. They can't unsee him because it wasn't just information anymore. There was a transforming and renewing of their minds. They're like, I never even need to see your face again, Jesus. This hope that I have now cannot die. And this hope that I have, fear drove me out of Jerusalem because they killed the leader. They're hunting for the followers. I'm leaving. It's time to go. Their hope stirred up, and their hope was now greater than their fear. And they run back to Jerusalem. They run back, and they say, hey, guys, everything you said was true, and we've seen him. Actually, if you keep reading the story, Jesus appears again to everyone there. Hope. Hope looks like courage. You can't live your life without hope. Now, here's the thing. Hope is actually what draws you to the future. Hope draws you. You can't hope for something in the past. You can only hope for something that's in the future. Now, there's this thing called eternity that I don't quite understand. I know there's a past. We're in the present. There's a future that's coming that's right now that became past. Future, past, present. You just go crazy. This present, past, present. But every time I say past, it's the present. We have this understanding of what eternity should be. Scripture says put eternity in our hearts, but we live in a place where we're in the present, but there's a past and there's a future. But often we live in the past. Shame. Man, that thing that I did, or that thing I didn't do. And it makes us avoid certain places, certain people, certain conversations. We just pull back because of the shame. And we're right back there. It was 20 years ago, but we're like, or we just go, like I had a friend and a roommate driving in the car, and he'd go like, ugh, and just hit my car. I'd be like, dude, this is a Honda. Please don't hit the merchandise. And I'd ask him, well, why? What are you doing? He's like, I just remembered something that happened. But it wasn't like yesterday. It was like 5 years ago. But in that moment, instantly he's back there in that moment. Shame holds us captive in the past. Fear. What's going to happen with Bitcoin? What if I lose my job? What if this person's sick, and what if they don't get better? And fear moves us into a future. You see, we were made to live in eternity. So whether you and I like it, even though we are in the present, we are constantly being pulled into the past and into the future. Shame will pull you to the past. Fear puts you into the future. But the way we were meant to live in eternity is this. Jesus and the scriptures often say, remember what I've done. Remember how faithful I am. When you look to the past, you should see the faithfulness of God, and you're filled with gratitude. Gratitude moves you into the past. But here's what happens. As you see what God has done, not only for you, but for your family, for Israel, for the world and the nations, that gratitude starts to build up a hope. And that hope starts to pull you towards the future. A future that God is calling you to. Now, hope is not this wishful thinking. Well, I hope things work out. No, hope is not I wish. Don't get your hopes up. Why? Because it's just crossing your fingers, flipping a coin. It's gambling. No, the hope that we have, it says that our hope is certain and sure. That is the true hope. Now, if you've ever been disappointed, it might be an opportunity to say, Lord, where have I misplaced my hope? Have I misplaced my hope? Is there something I'm not understanding right now? You can't live without hope. Now, some of you might have not felt like yourself, like, I just haven't been me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's lack of motivation. I need to follow more motivational people on Instagram. Like, you don't know. No, it's a hope deficit. You are the best version of yourself when you are filled with hope. You know, I love to go shopping on the app, and I buy groceries. And I'll buy things, and then later my wife would be like, we already have 3 of those things. I'd be like, it's good for you. So I just bought it. Romaine lettuce, buy. Red onions, buy. Pasture raised, why not? Buy. I'll buy all these things, and they're healthy for you, and they're good for you. And then my wife will say, are you going to do anything with this lettuce? And I was like, yes, I am. One day. Not now, I'm tired. And she's like, yeah, because it's all like moldy now. And I'm like, what? But I just bought it yesterday. It's like, you bought that 3 weeks ago. It just got smushed by the other lettuce you bought. This is no joke. And some of you are laughing because like, my husband does it too. Here's the thing. I didn't have a vision for that lettuce. I just bought it because it was good. And it just sat there until it rotted. The scriptures say where there's no vision, the people perish. If you don't have a vision for lettuce, it'll turn into mold. If you don't have a vision for your life, it'll perish. You could have $1 million in your bank account. You don't have a vision for that $1 million, it will erode and perish. Every area of your life where you don't have a vision for your life, you don't have a vision for your marriage, for your children, for your health. But here's the thing. We need vision. But what kills vision? Disappointment. Disappointment. Now, my wife and I, we got 2 beautiful children. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we got pregnant again. And the way we are, I come from a family of 6 kids, like boom, 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 like we just get pregnant. Like we're like, let's get pregnant. And then a couple days later, or a week later, or 2 weeks later, like, we're pregnant. Hey, that's how it happened the first time. That's how it happened the second time. That's how it happened the third time. And so friends are asking us, like, how do you get pregnant? What are you guys doing? Like, is Joe taking some, like, Korean medicines? And, like, what are you, and we're like, we're doing what you're supposed to do, and then pregnant. We didn't know that a lot of our friends were going through infertility. We're like, hey, we're praying for you. Second trimester, first trimester, some people don't tell people when they're pregnant because the pregnancy can end. And so we're in the second, but we're like, well, let's just tell people because if anything happens, we need community support. It's the second trimester, it's almost like month 6. And like, I'm like the first time that we were pregnant and Aaron told me like, we're pregnant. I was like, we're pregnant? We're pregnant? It's like, we're pregnant. I was scared, honestly, because I didn't know what to do. I was like, what does this mean? No more video games? No, I'm kidding. I was like, what? I want this. I want this. I just need a moment. But I want it. I just need to understand. I'm going to still need a moment, right? Like, with the second one, I was like, hey, this is good. Yeah. And our third one, I was like, God, what a blessing, God. You said in your scriptures that children are a blessing from the Lord. Like, this feels right. What a blessing. I get a text from my wife, can you meet me at home? And I'm like, this is not good. I just leave work, go straight home, walking around the apartment. Hey, where are you? Where are you? She comes through the door and just says, there's no heartbeat. And I'm like, I'm slow. I'm like, I need a moment. Like, what? There's no heartbeat. And we just embraced each other and we just cried. And there was just it took a long time. A lot of prayer, a lot of people, just even like prophetic words, a lot of healing, therapy, it just took us a long time. It took my wife a long time. We had different journeys going to the same place. And then recently, even people in this church praying for her, she was like, I'm no longer afraid of what might happen. I want to try again. I was like, are you sure? She's like, I want to try again. So we do what we do. Bam, pregnant. Now, we lost the baby. And she's like, something doesn't feel right. I feel cramps. And I was like, no, our first child, I prayed for a miracle. And God didn't answer the way I thought he would. But the faith I built up, like, I'm spiritually jacked. Like, I got the faith, babe. Like, God didn't answer the way I wanted. But the prayer and the faith and the trusting I did, that faith remained. I've got faith to pray for this child right now. I placed my hand on her stomach. I prayed, life, God. Life, protect this child, Lord. Babe, go to sleep. It's okay. God got us. Wake up. Do you still have cramps? No. Still had her appointment that day. Go to the hospital. There's no heartbeat. Like, this pregnancy ended. The next day, I take her into the hospital. And we're sitting there, and I'm just in disbelief. I'm like, God, we went through the heartbreak, and we did the work, and we prayed, and we trusted, and we hoped. And so we went through the heartbreak, so now this is the breakthrough, right? This is where you smash through from heaven to earth, right?
And while we're there, my wife, she's sitting there. She says, after that last time, I felt when our youngest was born, I felt God tell me this is not the last time. So even with what happened with the previous miscarriage, I was like, this is not the last time. And she looked at me and it's like, I still believe God. This is not the last time. And at that moment, I wasn't there with her. She's the one going through all of it. And I was like, babe, let's just focus on right now. Let's just get you better. Let's get you home. Because my hope had taken such a hit, I couldn't even see tomorrow. I couldn't see anything. I don't want to think about trying again or this. No, my hope was gone. Let's just try to salvage what we can. And I just went to the Lord and said, God, I can't move forward in this because I don't have hope. I don't have hope. And God, I just need you to meet me here in this place right now. They came back later, got an email and found out that it was another daughter. We cried a lot. I still cry. I still will cry. But I sense his nearness. And when I sense she's walking near, I'm like, no, don't pass. Stay with me. Stay with me in the pain, God. All I have right now is pain. Come into it. I'm not going to run from it. And I'll tell you this. The first time I grieved, the second time I didn't want to think about it. I was like, got to take care of my wife, my kids, my job. Got to close out the year. And I ignored it for 2 or 3 days. And then it just hit me. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. I opened the door and said, Jesus, come in. Come in and meet me in the pain. And as he met me in the pain, and I know it's a process. It's not going to be this one-time thing. Hope started to come back. And I was like, her name is Hope. Her name is Hope. And my hope is just rising up again, God. And there's like this defiant hope in me. And my wife, she's just incredible. She was sitting there and she was like, when I was lying there in the hospital, I was like, the thing I feared most happened. And she said, the thought I had in my head was, is that all you got? And it's not that it's not hard. It's hard. It's not that it's not hard. It's hard. But at the same time, she was like, is that all you got? That scripture says, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? She's like, is that all you got? You cannot kill my hope. I don't want anyone to think, though, that we just flip the switch and we're hopeful, we never cry, we're joyful. But there is like this hope that refuses to die, that just rises up. Because now my hope is not just in my family of 4, a family of 5, family of 6. My hope is ultimately in Jesus, that he will come back and make all things new. It don't matter what's going to come. One day he's going to come. He's going to make all things new. God also has a vision for the future. And it says in the scriptures that he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. He says, I will be their God. They will be my people. I will wipe every tear from their eye. There'll be no more pain, no more grief, no more suffering, no more sorrow. It says, then the voice on the throne said, look, I'm making all things new. Jesus took the bread. And it says he blessed it. He looked at this bread and he said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. You have my favor, you have my blessing. And then he broke the bread because this was his body. He's like, because my body's broken, you're going to be filled with hope. You're going to see a future. I'm going to give you a future. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, to give you a hope and a future. A future that you can start to see, not just dream again, but see again. And when your hope is greater than your fear, you start to move, you start to run towards it. You start to look like a courageous person. You start to take action in your life. He took the bread and said, I'm going to break this bread because it's my body that's been broken for you.